inevitably has an impact on trade across the globe, and South Africa will not be spared from this impact. And part of the reality is that we rely to a large extent on the supply of not crude oil particularly, because crude oil we gain from the African continent, we access this primarily from the African continent. But processed oil and energy sources are a major issue that we're engaging with. We are confident that the work that's been done by Minister Mantashe and his team has mitigated the impact to a large extent. So from a supply point of view, we think that security has been secured in the country based on the engagements and negotiations for alternative supply sources. We have also made significant strides in addressing challenges in the area of fertilizers and ensuring that we're able to source input both locally and internationally for fertilizer production in the country and maintaining that capacity and growing it to the extent that it would be needed. We're working very actively. The President has established an interministerial committee that is focused on this task. The interministerial committee met last night, meeting this evening again, reporting to Cabinet tomorrow on the processes that we're putting in place to address these issues. And we'll keep South Africa continuously informed of developments in that regard. Now, Ntokozo was making reference to companies that have made commitments and possibly are currently going through business rescue. Of course, business rescue is part of the architecture of our national act that governs business activity in the country. And the intention with the business rescue process is to ensure that instead of companies immediately going into liquidation, that mechanisms are put in place to manage the rescue of those businesses. And we continue to say that for as long as a business is under business rescue, it means that operationally it's still functional, that it is still meeting certain obligations, and there's continuous reporting to the CIPC on the progress that's being done with regards to business rescue. But it is part of the business cycle that certain businesses will do well and others might struggle, and we acknowledge that as part of the business cycle. To the extent that we can provide support either through business rescue or even through the ITC mechanisms of providing support, like we've done with many other companies where we've had to intervene during the business rescue cycle, we've provided facilities that enable business rescue to take place. So we continue to work with those companies to ensure that their investments are able to yield the initial commitments that they're made in the country. Tariff-free exports into the Chinese market start on the 1st of May. Just to give context, in terms of the China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement, the agreement entailed that between developing countries there needs to be an engagement that enables a partnership between China and that country. And we've been engaged with the Chinese on what is the Early Harvest Agreement, which Early Harvest Agreement is identifying specific products that would be included, amongst others, for Chinese products that seek access into our market, and in many ways products that we can take into the Chinese market, because in terms of the WTO rules, we have to ensure that when developing countries trade and make concessions with each other, that these are applicable across the board. So we're going through that process, but I should say that the agreement with China is that, in fact, it is not intending that they would be bringing products into South Africa that would compromise the integrity of our economy and the market in the South African economy. So we're looking at a whole set of initiatives that would mitigate negative impact, if any such was anticipated. Um, the goods are being negotiated, but the Chinese have said that whilst we are negotiating the early harvest agreement, they announced at the African Union Heads of State Summit this year that there would be a 1-year early harvest for all of Africa across the board. And that's the part that we're implementing. We're currently finalizing the goods that would be able to take advantage of this initial early harvest. I'm saying there are two levels of early harvest. The one is unilateral, that they've said for the first year, starting from the 1st of May, you can immediately trade, and we're looking at the set of products. The second is where we have now a detailed engagement of what South African specific products will also be able to gain access to that market. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister. So we'll take the next and final round. I'm just informed that we have to make our way back upstairs now. So we'll start here with this question. There's a hand this side as well. That's number 2 with the black coat. Thank you very much. Number 3. Number 4. Okay. And we'll close on that question. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Minister. We have 2 questions. The first question, what is the importance of investment in African market? And another question, what are your expectations for future investment cooperation between China and South Africa? That is all.
Thank you. The second question over here. Thanks.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Tando Michael from the Business Day. You've mentioned the Middle East conflict and how it could impact on South Africa in other aspects. But how concerned are you that investments from particularly the GCC nations, that's the Gulf nations, could come to a halt as they focus more on their domestic issues, including their defense budgets? We already know that the GCC countries are invested in South Africa in a number of sectors, including hospitality and so on and so forth.
Thank you. 3 just behind you with the laptop. Thank you.
So much, Kaliko from Reuters News. Minister, the President said 22 source markets committed today. I wanted to find out, are China and the United States among them? And if so, can we get an idea about how much each committed and which sectors they were interested in?
Thanks. And our last question.
Morning, Minister. I'm Mobilia, also from Reuters. So just to touch on China specifically, costs. Are there any Chinese car manufacturers that have made commitments? And just on your update really on your conversations with the Chinese automakers that are interested in investing in South Africa. Where is that? Have you had any progress with that conversation? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to ask for this mic. Thanks, Minister.
Oh.
Yeah, they were struggling to hear you earlier.
With the projection. Thank you very much. I struggled a bit to hear the first question, which is the importance of African trade. For South Africa, I imagine that was the question. As we said in the speech, Africa remains the core of our trade policy, primarily because we continue to send manufactured goods primarily into the African continent. We're a major trading partner to many of the countries on the continent, and we work very closely in identifying areas of mutual benefit with our counterparts on the continent. Therefore, when we say there's a butterfly strategy, if you think about it, the spine of that butterfly is Africa. It is the core of what our trade and investment strategies anchored on. And then we spread our wings into the other regions of the world. Coming to the China-specific issues, we anticipate increased investment relations with China. Firstly, it is the announcement that we raised earlier in the speech, and the comment has been made about the China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement, and of course the agreement to create access to the Chinese market, which is duty-free and quota-free access into the Chinese market. That's a great opportunity to get our product into the Chinese market. Starting from the 1st of May, we'll take advantage of that. Going forward, products that we're sending into China, duty-free, will be increasing. But it's also about a commitment by China to invest in South Africa. As an investor that has said, we're looking at South Africa as an area where we can pivot our investments onto the African continent from an industrialization point of view. The discussions we're having with them include cooperation around semiconductors, around critical minerals, and other initiatives, including the auto sector, as was asked in relation to China. It's an area that we're talking to them about. We've had discussions around steel and what the future of steel would be in the context of China and what the relationship would be going forward. We're having discussions around standards. We've agreed to work on a system that makes us agree on standards, because standards are very important for trade. If you agree on the standard, it is easier to get your product into that market. If you don't have agreed to standards, it becomes an impediment to that growth. So our agreements include addressing even those. Initially, it was between the South African Bureau of Standards and their counterparts, but we've now agreed to broaden it to an overarching standards agreement that would be at a ministerial level, so that we're able to ensure that all the standard bodies, in our context as the DTIC, it would include the South African National Accreditation Systems, the National Regulator for Compulsory Standards, the SAPS, South African Metrology Institute or Standards Body. So we're looking at all those bodies and their counterparts so that we can agree on those standards and ensure easier access to market and easier trade, but also for them to be able to come into the country as investors. We are looking at the auto sector. We've had a government-to-government discussion. We're talking to individual companies in China. Cherry is meeting with the president today in relation to the announcement they've made to take over the Nissan plant and to expand and rebuild the Nissan plant to meet their standards. We're engaging with, as you know, it's been topical, the issues around possibly one of the companies taking over the Mercedes plant in the Eastern Cape. We're talking to Ceylon in relation to tire manufacturing in the country, and they've been looking at coming into the country. So, and these are some of the commitments that essentially would be made today. Now, of course, I can't make the commitments on behalf of the people that would be announcing later. I would be preempting the announcement that are made later. So please excuse me if I don't go into the detail of who will announce what. I can say that there are Chinese companies that would be announcing, there are American companies that would be announcing. So yes, both the US and China are on board. We've got the CEO of the US chamber here. She's consistently in South Africa. We work very well with US-based companies. We've got representation from Europe, representing both Europe broadly, but also the respective countries. We've got Japan, with whom we're working very closely. Now, with regards to the Middle East, and one of the things that's been quite interesting is to receive calls from the Middle East that say, please make arrangements, we want to come. And on our side, the team has been saying, well, we are anxious about whether travel arrangements can be made. And they say, no, leave the travel arrangements to us. We want to come because we're still interested in the commitment. So a commitment or commitments would also be coming from the Middle East, because they see the need to continue to trade with us. And some of the opportunities are in areas where there's mutual benefit. I mean, if you think about it, food, agriculture, agro-processing remain important, particularly to regions that are in desert regions. And access to product becomes also important for them. Therefore, some of the commitments they are making are also practical commitments about what is in their interest in as much as it is in our interest. I think I've covered all of that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much, Minister, and thank you very much, colleagues. That concludes the briefing this afternoon. We will be in touch on any other questions that you may have. Thank you very much.